Donald Trump and his MAGA regime are laying waste to our Constitution. They're assaulting the rule of law. His Vice President, J.D. Vance, has taken to Twitter to claim that the court doesn't have the power to constrain the Trump administration's lawless, unconstitutional agenda. So much of why we are here today is because of a failure of accountability. The failure of accountability to confront the violent insurrection that Donald Trump led, the foot dragging from Attorney General Merrick Garland in taking seriously that assault on our democratic order. Last year, we saw this endemic of ill accountability take hold at our Supreme Court as the country came to learn about the decades-long corruption scandal involving Justice Clarence Thomas. And then last summer, while the court was considering important cases involving Trump's fitness for office and his liability and criminal accountability for leading the violent assault on the Capitol and the effort to overturn the 2020 election, we learned in the New York Times that Justice Alito was flying a flag upside down in front of his house days after the January 6th insurrection. We learned that the Washington Post had known about this story and failed to report it, a failure of accountability in its own right. And then the New York Times, years after the fact, told the world. And we learned from that reporting that the court knew about this, that John Roberts knew about it. And nevertheless, Sam Alito stayed on these cases. After that reporting, and as part of that reporting, we saw a really important piece of testimony come to light from an individual, an everyday person living in Justice Alito's neighborhood, who knew that what he was saying about the facts surrounding that incident was false. Emily Baden was that neighbor, and I'm thrilled to have her join us here today because you embody the type of courage and individual accountability that we need to start inspiring in our communities. And I'm so grateful for what you did in that instance. Emily, I wanted to invite you in on Midas Touch Legal AF. I'm Alex Aronson with Court Accountability Action. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Wanted to invite you in here today, Emily, to talk about this incident that you were a part of, that you were brave enough to bring to the public's attention, and to talk a little bit about what happened in the aftermath and how it reflects this breakdown in democratic accountability that has been such a big part of the devolution of our constitutional order. Thanks for joining us. Emily, what happened with Justice Alito? How were you involved in this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the kind words. I really, really appreciate it. And the whole reason that I went public, as they say, is because I am a regular person, and I think that all regular people have the ability, but also the responsibility to stand up in the face of injustice whenever we encounter it. So how am I involved? I was their neighbor, and I never actually saw the upside down flag. But when the story broke, when the New York Times was reaching out to everybody on the block, like, hey, what do you know about this? They got to me, and I said, well, I actually don't know anything about the flag, but I have other information that might be important because I've had some pretty uncomfortable interactions with these people. And then we got to talking, and I just told them exactly what happened. And basically how it turned out is that they blamed me for their decision to fly the flag, and they were lying. And I know that they're lying, not just because I'm saying so, but because there's evidence. Like the interaction that we had, that they said, they called my wife the most vile epithet you could ever imagine. That happened on February 15th. And we know that because I called the cops that day, because they actually were harassing me. So I called the cops that day. There's record of it. There's also a witness. One of my neighbors, unfortunately, saw me say that vile epithet. But anyway, the flag was up in January, around January 6th, and the interaction happened on February 15th. So there's no possible way that interaction was their reason for flying the flag. It's a straight up lie. And it's a lie that he told to the world and to Congress, more importantly.
Yeah, and this came about, as a matter of congressional inquiry because of its relevance to these cases that he was sitting on and refused to recuse from. There's a
Right.
federal statute. There's a lot of talk about how there's no enforceable ethics code at the Supreme Court. Of course, there are federal laws that explicitly apply to the justices, and one of them is a recusal law that mandates a justice's recusal where his or her impartiality might reasonably be questioned. And so senators, at the urging of a lot of citizens, a lot of advocacy groups, we were a big part of leading the charge to demand real accountability and oversight from the Congress on this, sent him a letter demanding his recusal and asking for an explanation. He made up all sorts of stuff, right? He put all of the onus and responsibility for flying the flag on his wife, Martha Ann, said there was nothing I could have done about it. She said she loves flying flags. I don't. And then he engaged in this apparently false accounting of the facts leading up to this and misrepresented this altercation that you had with him. First of all, as just an aside, it's striking that things got so heated in this dynamic with the Alitos that you felt the need to call the police to intervene. They were harassing you so much that a sitting Supreme Court justice and his wife had to step in. I mean, that must have been just an amazingly intense experience to go through. How did that feel?
No, it was horrifying. And people, ever since this story came out, people are like, well, why didn't you go to the press sooner? And I'm like, with what? With my own personal anecdote about my hostile and abusive neighbors? Like, what could I go to the press with, you know?
Yeah.
It just was a really intense time. And it was also really scary because the level of power that they have and the level of power that I have could not be more different. So yeah, it was scary. And I did call the cops because we had had interactions like that before, but I didn't have any type of evidence. And I thought, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I was like, if these people do something to me, then there will be a paper trail of me trying to get something done, like trying to contact the authorities or something.
Yeah. And after Alito sent those letters to Congress saying, you know, nothing to see here. This was my wife. Here's how the facts proceeded. Here's why I don't think I have to recuse. And of course, the recusal obligation connected to the impartiality that was, I think, self-evident to many observers that were not liberal or progressive. I think everybody recognized the conflict of interest this post, and of course, that's because this upside down flag was an important symbol of the Stop the Steal movement.
Yeah.
January 6th insurrectionists were flying it. He basically told Congress to go pound sand. Some of us were calling for then chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, to subpoena him, to bring in other witnesses to get to the bottom of this, because the court tells the world, you know, nobody can touch us. We're an independent branch of government. They shunt aside checks and balances as a concept, at least as applied to themselves.
Yeah.
And I was really frustrated with how Durbin responded. He refused to do that. He said they're a separate branch of government, sort of parroting that line. Did you have any outreach from the committee or from Congress at all to tell your story publicly?
No, no, I didn't. And if I had, that's like one of the scariest things I could ever imagine, like
Yeah.
testifying before Congress. But in this instance, I 100% would. If I were subpoenaed, if I were asked, I 100% would.
Yeah.
Because as I told to all these media outlets and everything, like these are the facts of the matter, and they clearly go against the statement that he made to Congress. He's lying. And it's important that people know that because what else is he lying about? Why don't we have a code of ethics on the court? Why can't we do anything when things like this happen? Like, this is egregious, like an upside down American flag a week after January 6th. Any reasonable person would think that that should make him unfit to at least be on the Trump versus USA case.
He stayed on the case.
Yeah.
Voted for Trump, kept him from being held accountable for his role in that election subversion effort, and put him on a glide path to fascist dictatorship, which 100%. We are now living under. It's really harrowing. And I think it's also worth noting, Emily, lying to Congress, which I think there's substantial evidence is what occurred here. That's a crime in itself. That's a false statement to Congress. 18 USC 1001 makes it illegal to submit a false statement to Congress, which seems to be exactly what what Alito did, and nobody has tried to do a thing about it. Right? We're within the
Yeah.
statute of limitations. Something tells me that Pam Bondi is not going to be taking this up. But
Yeah.
even as Democrats are in the minority and increasingly looking to the court to be a guardrail against Trump's worst excesses, it strikes me that it's deeply problematic to have flag-waving partisans among that court majority without any accountability, and that this story remains incredibly relevant and important today. One thing I think we can see from the way Republicans have prosecuted their politics for decades is that they don't give up on these issues, right? Even just a few weeks ago, Signalgate was the biggest national security scandal in U.S. history, and you haven't heard a Democrat mention it in weeks now. And this seems like a paradigmatic example of that, something that the absence of accountability, the absence of a full transparency process around this incident that you helped bring to light creates a rot within our constitutional system that cannot be resolved until it's addressed. How do you think people should? Obviously, you were thrust into this. You didn't ask for this. You just happened to be Alito's neighbor. You wrote this wonderful post in Courier News recently, talking about what you went through, the process of making this decision to come forward. But you also said, you're not done fighting for democracy, and you're not an activist, you're not an organizer, you're not a lawyer. You're just an ordinary citizen who is doing their part. How do you think other folks can take lessons from what you've done and apply this to their own opposition, their own network building and defense of democracy in this moment?
Yeah, well, we are in we're in unprecedented times constantly. We are in the darkest of times. And I think average people like myself are asking ourselves, what am I going to do about this? What can I do about this? And I think that every single person, regardless of what they do for a job or what little corner of influence they have in the world, we are all capable of being a part of the resistance, even in the smallest of ways. And I just want to galvanize my fellow citizens. I want to encourage people to stand up and fight back, because this is not normal. And, you mentioned Signalgate. That was 2 weeks ago, right? Or 3 weeks ago, maybe. And we've already forgotten about it. And that can't continue to happen. We have to keep talking about this stuff. We have to keep pushing our elected officials to do something.
Yeah. And when and if we are out of this darkness, when light starts peeping through again, we have to learn from the mistakes of the Biden era, from the unwillingness to pursue this type of accountability, from the desire, the short-sighted desire to wave a magic wand and bring back the world as it used to exist, imperfect as it was before Trump came in with his wrecking ball to our democratic values and norms. Because if we somehow get through this and we don't have that accountability, all we are doing is laying ourselves bare for it to happen again and for it to be worse, frankly.
Yeah, one thing I always say is if you are not a part of the resistance to Trump's fascist regime, if you are not actively doing what you can to resist, you are a part of it. You're helping it. Even if you're just I'm not getting involved, I can't do anything, you're helping it. You're helping him. Yeah. So that's just what I want to get through to everyone is we all have to come together and fight against this, because he truly fits the definition of a fascist dictator. And we are in real trouble unless we do something about it.
Yeah. And it's that silence, it's that fear that is the tactic they are leading with.
Oh, yeah.
And produces understandable reticence and hesitation to lean into these fights.
Yeah.
And the more of us do it, the more of us speak out, the more of us stand up for people who are vulnerable, use our privileges to fight against this assault on our freedoms, the stronger we will be, the harder it will be for them to target us. So, Emily, thank you for being that example, for your bravery in that moment, for continuing to talk about this. I was so thrilled to see that piece in Courier, because it feels like, I have not gotten over what happened with the Alito flag scandal and his failure to recuse and his active role in bringing us to this. And so I'm just really grateful for your advocacy, for your willingness to speak truth to power here. Please come back and join us here on Midas Touch Legal AF. We are cranking past 500,000 followers. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button while we've got you. Check out our work at courtaccountability.org and at Tilted Scales on Substack. I'm thrilled as always to be with you guys. Stay mad, stay motivated, stay mighty.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.